Welcome back to Spotlight. What's happening in Knoxville is just a perfect example of the double-edged sword of winning. Josh Heupel won 11 games in year 2 and made it to the playoffs in year 4. So year 5 last season was a step back with just 8 wins, and now the pressure is on to get back to the expectations that he previously set. It's never easy in the SEC, but this is the Vols' path in the new 9-game league format. It's weird to see, but no Gators, no Dogs on the schedule. Big games at home include Texas, Bama, and Kiffin's Tigers, with a tough road test in Aggieland come November. Let's talk more about these Tennessee Volunteers and welcome in Patrick Brown from GoVols 24/7 and Chip Patterson from the Cover 3 podcast. And Patrick, I'm going to start with you. You know the question. You've been being asked it all off season long, and that is the quarterback battle between Faison Brandon and George McIntyre. I will pull up our latest reporting from Matt Zenitz and Chris Hummer. They indicate that Brandon is kind of gaining that momentum to be the day one starter. Still a lot of time left. So Patrick, where would you put the status of the QB battle as it stands today?
Well, Emily, I'd put it as ongoing because this thing's not going to get settled until preseason camp. And I will say that Faison Brandon was the quarterback that created the most buzz during spring ball. Obviously, coming off of some of the offseason overtures that Tennessee made to try to avoid having its quarterback future in the hands of either a redshirt freshman with 9 career pass attempts or a true freshman in Faison Brandon, albeit a 5-star true freshman. That George McIntyre had a year in the program. He had been in the system, been in the offense, had flashed some good things last season, earlier in preseason camp a year ago. But you didn't really see that from him in spring ball, and certainly Faison Brandon at 6'3", 6'4", 215 pounds. Looks the part of a big-time SEC quarterback even at a young age. And he went out there and showed his talent, showed why he was a 5-star, and showed why he was the #1 player in the 2026 recruiting cycle for much of the cycle. And I think he might have finished as the #1 player had he not missed most of his senior season with a thumb injury. He came back from that and led his team to another state title. But during the spring, he flashed all the arm talent that you need. I wouldn't say that he's got a Joe Milton arm, but plenty of arm talent to get the job done in Josh Heupel's offense, and also the ability to escape, make plays with his legs. And you just kind of didn't see that from George McIntyre. There's been questions about his weight. He's put on 20 pounds since he got to Tennessee, but is still barely pushing 200. So that's a big question of durability with him. He's talented. He was recruited by LSU and Nick Saban's Alabama coming out of high school. But McIntyre made a big jump from spring ball to preseason camp a year ago. I think he's going to have to do that again. Or if things keep continuing like they did coming out of spring ball, I think Faison has the inside track to win that job. But it's going to be one in August.
Yeah, Faison Brandon in a vacuum gives Tennessee the best chance to have its best finish. He is the more talented of the 2 quarterback options, but college football is not played in a vacuum. This is a human sport, and he is a true freshman. If you want to go to the intangibles, though, I would point to something that Patrick just mentioned, because he did suffer that thumb injury. He was a 5-star prospect, and still he wanted to come back to the team that he had been so successful with throughout his high school career. 35-1 as a starting quarterback, with a couple playoff runs there coming out of Greensboro, North Carolina. My thought here is that if the coaching staff feels confident in what Faison Brandon's going to be able to do against SEC defenses when the bullets are firing, the skill set is there for him to be dynamic in an up-tempo RPO type approach that will stress defense and create one-on-one opportunities for his wide receivers. Again, in a vacuum, he's the perfect quarterback for Josh Heupel. It's just college football's not played in a vacuum, so I won't be surprised if the staff wants to see this competition last so that he's pushed and really tested as much as you can be before the start of the season.
Yeah, you mentioned the perfect quarterback for Josh Heupel. I said this before the break. We would have a massive age gap between QBs, with Joey Aguilar being 24 years old last year, and Faison Brandon, if he does end up being the starter, just turned 18 years old at the beginning of this month. So a lot of differences when it comes to what Josh Heupel has to teach his QBs. But Chip, outside of the quarterback position, what's the biggest question that you have for this offense?
whether or not the running back tandem can be one of the best in the SEC. And if you're doing that, you are making life easier on the quarterback. Because in Deshaun Bishop, yes, it's a 1,000-yard rusher a year ago, 16 touchdowns to his name. But I think that that's that type of effective reliability that can be a real anchor of that up-tempo attack. And I really, really like who they got coming out of Tulane after a freshman year that maybe offered some promise. Javin Gordon is the backup, who I think could be a nice complement piece right there. So when I see Bishop and I see Gordon, I see the potential of a ground game that can make life easier on Brandon and really stress opposing defenses.
I'm picking up what you're putting down, Chip, because my biggest question for Tennessee is the offensive line, and it kind of goes along the same lines, right? What's the best friend to a young quarterback is a strong running game. Tennessee's got Deshaun Bishop back. He was an all-SEC performer last season at wide receiver. They've got Braylon Staley and Mike Matthews back as well. They've also got 5 starters back on the offensive line, but that group was a little bit underwhelming last season. A lot of first-time starters. They rushed for the fewest yards in Josh Heupel's tenure there at Tennessee. First time they had fallen short of 2,500 yards on the ground, despite Bishop's great breakout season. And they allowed 4 sacks in 4 of Tennessee's 5 losses. So that's a group to me that has to take steps forward. Now they're bringing back, like I said, 5 starters. It's not going to be the same lineup. They've got David Sanders Jr., who was a former 5-star all-SEC freshman, flipping over to the left side for Lance Hurd, who transferred to Kentucky. And they're banking on those guys building off the year of experience, and I think they're also building off the changes they made in the offseason program. One of the big underrated moves I think Tennessee made was bringing in Derek Owings. He's Indiana's strength coach. They paid him $1.2 million and gave him a support staff, a nutritionist, the whole works. And if you want him to come in and Indiana-ize your football team, that's going to start in the trenches. That's going to start with an offensive line that runs the football. They struggle to run the football against the best teams on the schedule last season. You got to protect that young quarterback so he's not hurried. He's not under pressure all the time. So I think that's the group that's going to, other than the quarterback, obviously, is going to define the ceiling for this Tennessee offense in 2026.
Indiana eyes. That's a great verb, and one that I'm sure every program in the country would be happy to welcome into their building. Let's talk about the defense, though. Jim Knowles, of course, coming in as the new defensive coordinator. There's a chance that over half the starters on defense are transfers, so I have a lot of questions about this defense. Patrick, what is your biggest?
Well, it doesn't feel right because Tennessee's defensive line coach is Rodney Garner, who's one of the best in the business, been in the SEC since the late 90s at Georgia, Auburn, was at Tennessee during their national championship run, or their national championship season. But I got a lot of questions about the defensive line. Tennessee has one of the best linebacker rooms, I think, in the SEC with a lot of depth and experience there. As you mentioned, Emily, they've got transfers that are going to fill out a lot of the secondary. But on the defensive line, they lost 7 of their top 10 guys and their top 6 pass rushers from last season. So that's a group with a little bit more unknown. You've got some guys that have been rotational players. They're going to be stepping into bigger roles, potentially starting. You're going to have some underclassmen that didn't play a whole lot last year. They're going to have to sort of fill in the back end of that rotation, and they're going to need to find some playmakers. I sort of look at 3 guys that are going to have great seasons for Tennessee's defensive line to be better than it was last season. That's David Hobbs, a defensive tackle, former top 50 recruit, battled injuries throughout his career, but he's an NFL-level talent when healthy and when playing well. And then 2 transfers, like you talked about. Tulane's Jordan Norman is more of an edge guy. He had 10 career sacks, played on that college football playoff team for the Green Wave last season. And then a guy who was really good this spring in Penn State's Xavier Gilliam. He looks like a guy that could be a real impact player on the middle of the defensive line.
Yeah, I'm just going to go with the Chaz Coleman of it all. You know, so talented and really could have been or maybe will be, or I mean, I don't have any insight. Patrick can probably give you the latest on this, but the unknown about his availability and whether or not he can be a big factor for the Tennessee defense leads my question to be, what's the backup plan there? Now, one of the names I think it could be was one Patrick just mentioned in Jordan Norman. I'd add Tyree Weathersby to that, but it was just an on-paper addition that made so much sense with Jim Knowles coming in and understanding what that future could be like, that now all of a sudden, as it's maybe trending more towards him not being a factor in the 2026 season at a minimum, you know, what is the backup plan? What does the rest of that room look like? Who is ready to step up? Because I will also add, in terms of defending the pass, there's a couple ways to do it, right? You can rush the passer or defend the secondary with some of those transfer additions as well in a group that lost a couple NFL draft picks. The pass defense is kind of in flux, and a lot of it has to do with all of the unknown around Chaz Coleman.
Oh, Chip, that was a lot of questions that you had on defense. I feel like we handled almost every single position on the defensive side of the ball. But I love, I'll give you a little peek behind the curtain. When Chip popped into the Zoom here, he lamented the fact that he had to hop into another homerism segment here with the Tennessee Vols. Of course, me being a Knoxvillian, Patrick living there and covering the team. So, Chip, I'm going to go to you here because there's going to be no homerism whatsoever. So walk us through your schedule prediction for this Tennessee team with no bias.
Well, I will say that for Tennessee, you do have a situation looking at this schedule where I think that you've got to love the talent and the status of where you sit in the SEC, because as Auburn is going through transition, as Arkansas is going through transition, as Kentucky is going through transition, you've got a couple of spots where potentially plucky, thorn in your side type teams are not necessarily in a position to jump up in weight class, in my opinion. And then it's going to come down to being able to take care of business in some of those biggest games. You will note that I've got a win against LSU. Yes, that is another Lane Kiffin trip to Knoxville that I've got my eyes on. I think that somewhere between that and Texas A&M, it ends up being 1-1 through that stretch. But that win against LSU, the way that I've got this laid out, could leave them at 9-3 and potentially be their path to being the last team into the college football playoff. I think the SEC gets 5 teams into the CFP this year. I'm not sure who 4 and 5 are, but after going with the LSU and handing that to Tennessee, I've got to make it right. I've got to stay honest with this, Emily. And I was looking at it, I was like 9-3, win against LSU. That could be CFP bound.
You sure you don't bleed a little orange there, Chip? 9-3, I'm pretty happy with that.
Yeah, it's a little over the win total. Win total's at 7.5, right? So they are one of the teams that I'm the highest on. Certainly the team that I'm higher than the market in the SEC than any of the other SEC teams.
Wow, okay. We love to see it, Chip, Patrick. We appreciate you guys giving us an eye on the Tennessee Volunteers. And out of 16 teams, the Vols' odds to win the SEC are right there smack dab in the middle at 8 at 17-1. The Vols, they play 4 teams ahead of them, including Texas, who currently has the best odds to win the SEC at +300.